You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Packers Talk.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV. Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, we know who's in the Super Bowl now, and I'll tell you straight up, I do not like this Sunday. It's like withdrawal from football. I don't count the Pro Bowl. I mean,
wait, you're not a big Pro Bowl guy? It's like
not.
or a big Pro Bowl games guy. It's not even a real game. So
it's like
this is essentially the way that the NFL is like, hey, you're going to go a long stretch without football coming up. This is a little preview of that, so adjust accordingly. And for those, before we get deep into the show, Gil, for those preparing for the 2025 Packers season, because unfortunately 2024 came to a screaming halt, we have a few words about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packer tickets to Packer fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Also, you can watch every episode of No Huddle Radio on Packers Talk Network on YouTube. If you're following along with us, thank you so much for tuning in today. Click on the bell, turn the notifications on, tell your family, tell your friends, tell Gil's family, tell Gil's friends, tell your enemies, whoever. You can join the discussion, chat with us live. We'd love to see and talk about the comments coming our way. And Gil, we got quite a bit to talk about today with special teams grades. Specifically, we're going to talk a little Rich Bisaccia in a bit, but also a lot of big coaching news since we were last on these airwaves essentially a week ago.
Yeah, some changes coming down the pike, and I'm not sure I'm thrilled with all of them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, let's get right into it, Gil. And obviously, I feel like Rich Bisaccia is definitely the hot topic, and we'll get to him in just a bit. But let's start out first with the quarterback coach spot, where the Packers promoted Sean Mannion to quarterback coach. In case you didn't hear, Tom Clements retired. He stepped down. The guy's in his 70s. He deserved to step down. He coached Brett Favre. He coached Aaron Rodgers. He coached Jordan Love for a little bit. Sean Mannion was brought onto the Packers coaching staff a year ago. He seemed to be a really in-demand offensive assistant, a guy fresh out of the game. He was in the NFL for 9 years with Minnesota, with Seattle, with the LA Rams, and the Packers got him on the coaching staff, and now he's the quarterback coach. This just seemed like when they hired him a season ago that he was the heir apparent to Tom Clements.
Yeah, you sort of knew going in that this was the goal, and it worked out. I mean, Clemens had a very successful career. You mentioned he worked with all three of the Packers' last three great starters in Favre, Rodgers, and Love. But I believe he's, 72 years old now, so it is time for him to retire. And I think Sean Mannion, after learning 1 year under Clemens, is in a good position to take over and get this done.
And we'll see if Jordan Love takes a step forward. Sean Mannion could be another one of those guys who was a backup quarterback in the NFL for a time and then rose up through the ranks because he seems to be working his way up pretty quickly. He turns 33 years old in April. Remember, Kevin O'Connell was a backup for a short time in the NFL. Now he's one of the better head coaches in the NFL. Jim Harbaugh was a longtime NFL quarterback, one of the best coaches in the game. Doug Peterson, longtime backup specifically for Brett Favre. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. And there's just a lot of these guys that, especially today, young coaches who know offense, who knows quarterbacks, who know young quarterbacks and how to coach and develop quarterbacks. Sean Mannion, this is kind of a tryout for a bigger job. And if Jordan Love takes a step forward, I don't anticipate he'll be here very long.
No, but that would be a good problem to have because it means that the Packers are doing really, really well. So hopefully it works out and he gets the job done. And obviously this is a pivotal season coming up for Jordan Love. So, to quote a certain former Packers coach, it is time.
Yeah. The late Kevin Green, rest in peace, rest in power, sir. And another offensive coach that the Packers actually have brought back, and a guy who kind of rose through the ranks in Green Bay for a bit. He left for a bigger job, and now he's back in Green Bay after the previous jobs he didn't really do so well, and that's Luke Getsy, who's returning to Green Bay as an offensive senior assistant. He had a rough go after he left the Packers for Chicago to be the Bears offensive coordinator in 2022. Bears fired him after 2 seasons as the old coordinator. The Bears offense didn't rank higher than 20th in total offense, didn't rank higher than 18th in scoring offense in his 2 years. And then he spent the first half of last season as the Raiders offensive coordinator before he got fired after their Week 9 loss to the Bengals. The offense averaged about 18.7 points per game in 9 games, and the scoring dipped down for the Raiders after Getsy was canned. It was kind of impossible situations for Luke Getsy, but obviously Matt LaFleur, he was with Matt LaFleur from 2019 through 2021. He was on Mike McCarthy's staff from 2014 through 2017. 2018, he was the offensive coordinator at Mississippi State University. Maybe the reason why the Packers drafted Elton Jenkins in 2019. But Luke Getsy's back, and it just seems like a good role that he's returned to.
Yeah, I think he's a good fit. Obviously, he took, when he was an offensive coordinator, he was in 2 of the least easy teams to work with, didn't have a lot of talent to work with. And let's hope his return to Green Bay is beneficial both for him and for the team.
That's what I was going to say. It was hard to run an offense in Chicago when you have a quarterback who can't go through progressions and can't read the field as Justin Fields. Loved him at Ohio State, but it just hasn't clicked for him at the NFL level. And then Gardner Minshew. He's a journeyman quarterback for a reason. It's not a guy you want to build your offense around, not a guy you want to build your franchise around. But Luke Getsy back in Green Bay, I think that's a good resource for Matt LaFleur on the offensive side of the ball. And then the defensive line. This is where Packers have made some changes. The defensive line seemed to take a step back as a whole last year under Jeff Hafley in his first-year scheme, but Jason Brebovich was in his first year as the D-line coach after he was the outside linebackers coach under Joe Barry's watch. Brebovich is gone now, and they've hired DeMarcus Covington as the new defensive line coach. Covington was the defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots in 2024 in Gerard Mayo's lone season as the head coach. New England's defense was 22nd ranked overall. They were 22nd in scoring defense as well. And this is not something that you're going to really like to hear, but New England registered a league worst 28 sacks last year, but they were tied for 12th in opposing yards per carry average. So there is some positives there. He's a young guy. He's in his mid-30s, but it's an interesting hire, but a guy who has experience at a high level when it comes to coaching.
Yeah, he has. And look, to me, there was a problem with Brebovich, and what I heard through the grapevine was just that he wasn't big on technique, that he wasn't helping some of these guys improve their different moves that they could have and some of the little details. And hopefully Covington can come in and do that. Again, New England last year, maybe one of the least talented rosters, top to bottom, of any team in the league. So it's very difficult to judge him solely on, okay, they were 22nd in the league. Yes, they were 22nd in the league, but what was he working with? And, you know, there is that. Plus, you're coming off taking over after, you know, Bill Belichick leaves, a year or 2 after that. So that's one heck of a burden as well. Let's see how he does. It's not official yet. He hasn't actually signed the contract, but it is expected to be announced.
And Covington, this is only the second time. He's only been with the New England Patriots since he started coaching the NFL. Now he's going to be with the Green Bay Packers. And if he can improve the technique for these young guys, for this defensive line that seems to have a lot of talent, I think this is more so a hire where it's a Luke Van Ness hire. It's a Bretton Cox Jr. hire. Yep. It's an Aaron Mosby hire. It's a Devontae Wyatt hire. It's a Carl you name it. All the young guys that they have on this defensive front. This is the coach that seems like is going to be the guy for them. And remember, a couple of years ago, the Patriots, he was on the Patriots coaching staff as the D-line coach in 2022. They were in Green Bay for joint practices a few years ago.
That's true.
And you got to think Matt LaFleur or someone on the defensive side of the ball, probably Matt LaFleur, though, more than anybody, saw what this guy could bring as a coach. And you had to think that kind of got their antennas peeking upwards if you're Green Bay.
Yeah, you got to think that. And look, I mean, sometimes, those joint practices, little things get discussed that we're not privy to that end up making a difference down the line. It's one of those things. Coaching is like a fraternity, and connections between coaches are very important when it comes to hiring.
It's a small world. It's a small world after all, Gil. As my favorite ride at Disney. No, it's not my favorite ride. It's one of my least favorite rides, but I just wanted to chime that in there. And so it's an interesting hire. You just hope, because I feel like the Packers D-line has so much promise. Now they just got to do it. And yep. I hope this is the coach that helps put it together, because I think the talent is there. And like you said, New England, that's a team that Elliott Wolf has got his hands full as the general manager there, where there's a lot of work to do in New England. There's not a lot of depth, not a lot of talent there. And they also didn't have their best defensive tackle, Christian Barmore, for most of that year last year. Kind of a tall task for DeMarcus Covington last season in New England. Hopefully things are a little better in Green Bay. Now, as we were alluding to just a few minutes ago at the start of the show, it's Rich Bisaccia, the highest paid special teams coach in the NFL, and probably the most disappointing when it comes to the contract numbers and everything. But the Packers have not fired Rich Bisaccia or let him go, or he hasn't retired. They extended Rich Bisaccia earlier this week. He was rumored that he was possibly going to retire, but he's also an assistant head coach for Matt LaFleur and also has the title of game management advisor. It's interesting. It's puzzling. But clearly Matt LaFleur thinks pretty highly of him, Gil, because this is something where I feel like they could have made a change here, but his opinion is definitely valued inside 1265 Lombardi.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I understand you feel comfortable with Rich Bisaccia, you work well with Rich Bisaccia, but the special teams unit as a whole has not seen a major improvement. And once again, this year, the Packers were at or near the bottom of the league. I mean, these special teams rankings are not, it's not like the same as rushing defense. Where
it's not an exact science at all.
Right. You're not just saying, okay, this team gave up 100 yards a game, this team gave up 101.2. It's not quite that straightforward. But at the same time, consistently, since Bisaccia has been here, the Packers special teams have been ranked in the bottom quarter, if not lower. And it's disappointing because he came in with such high expectations. This guy was supposed to be the special teams guru. Now, as far as, him being the game manager and all of that stuff, he has head coaching experience. He's been in this league a long time. LaFleur certainly needs help. He had his issues this year with clock management, game management, play calling, using his timeouts down the stretch in games and in halves. So I'm more comfortable with Bisaccia maybe helping in that area than I am with him being back as special teams coordinator.
Yeah, it's interesting because PFF, where do you take their rankings with a grain of salt? And but the Packers special teams unit was the 32nd ranked overall unit this year. Special teams 32nd overall. Now, the big question that I have for you, Gil, and also on top of that too, Packers special teams units 11th most penalized amongst all special team units in the NFL in 2024. Not a lot of discipline there, and a lot of issues still in that phase of the game. But Maurice Drayton was such a disaster as a special teams coordinator when he was running the show on special teams in 2021. And it was honestly the reason why that Packers team was more than good enough to win the Super Bowl that year and get to the Super Bowl that year. Special teams let them down, and Mo Drayton had no control. It was terrible. Would you at least say Rich Bisaccia has been an upgrade from Mo Drayton?
Yes, I would. But like dollar for dollar, value-wise, expectation-wise, I didn't know what to expect from Mo Drayton. Rich Bisaccia was supposed to be this experienced special teams, one of the best special teams coaches in the entire league, and we just haven't seen the results. And it's been consistent. He's been here a number of years, and we're just not seeming to climb that ladder.
Yeah, it's a problem. And he obviously had a huge voice when the Packers drafted Anders Carlson. Goes to show, don't draft a kicker. Just don't. Just
find one.
Just go find one. And because that was a disaster. Obviously, he did a great job with Daniel Carlson, Anders' older brother, in Vegas with the Raiders. He did a great job as an interim head coach with the Raiders, getting them to the playoffs when he took over for John Gruden a few years ago before he jumped ship and came to Green Bay. He's a guy who seems to be well liked by his players and by other coaches too. But it's just a matter of there's got to be improvement. And I would rather the whole thing with the Packers, I don't care if they're just middle of the pack at special teams. Just don't turn over, don't blow assignments, just be average. Special teams is just a matter of doing your job. And Rich Bisaccia even said, though, where there's a lot more pressure in special teams because guess what? They don't get as many opportunities where an offense gets 4 chances to get a first down. Special teams, they get one shot. They get one chance every set of downs. That's it. At most, unless there's a penalty or something like that. You don't get that many opportunities to strike on special teams. And that makes it a lot harder, but it's a matter. That's why you hire Rich Bisaccia, though, to make things easier.
Yeah. And, look, when it comes to special teams, I look at it like, the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, and unfortunately there's been harm. I mean, badly timed penalties, mistakes, fumbles, blocked kicks returned against them for touchdowns. It's been frustrating. At least we have a kicker, though.
Yes, big time. And speaking of our specialists in general, Gil, let's grade some 2024 Packer specialists. How about we do that? So
let's go for it.
Well, let's start out where everything starts up front in football, and especially in special teams. Starts with the long snapper. That's Matt Orzech, who just finished his second year in Green Bay as the team's long snapper. Didn't have any muffed snaps, no muffed punts, no block kicks or anything like that. Gil, what's the grade that you give Matt Orzech for his 2024 performance?
He didn't have any major mistakes, but he also wasn't that consistent. So, to me, I give him a very average grade. I went with a C.
Yeah, and for me, that's the thing is he didn't make any mistakes. And obviously there were some snaps that were kind of low, kind of high, but maybe it was just because Daniel Whelan's such a good athlete, a punter, and a great holder too, mind you. And Brandon McManus was such a good kicker. Matt Orzech, though, he didn't have snaps where it's like, oh my gosh, like we got to get rid of this guy. But there are snaps where it's like we could use an upgrade. But I give him a B because he didn't make any massive mistakes. Yeah, not every snap was clean. That's life. That's how it goes. That not everything is going to be perfect, especially in football. But he gets a B. Yeah, he's human. He gets a B in my book. There weren't any snaps that went over anybody's head. There were no block kicks because of bad snaps. I give him a B.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. All right, and then let's go to returner real quick. Let's go to Keyshawn Nixon. He said after this past season that even though he's been an all-pro returner his first 2 years in Green Bay, he doesn't want to return kicks anymore, but he did return. He was the primary kick returner for the Packers this year, had 528 kick return yards, 6th in the NFL. Didn't have a fumble in the regular season, but he did lose a fumble due to penalty at Philly. But video show he recovered his own fumble, and then it was ruled as Philadelphia ball. It was a whole mess. Obviously, the NFL didn't know what they were doing in that situation. But Gil, this is just for the regular season, though, and you can maybe include the postseason in there. You can include the postseason. I don't care. But returner, Keyshawn Nixon, what grade do you give Keyshawn Nixon?
I gave Keyshawn a B, and the average was there. It wasn't like he had a bad average per return, but he didn't break any for really long gains. Didn't score a touchdown this year. And then it's his judgment. I just question. There are times when he runs the ball out and you're like, what is he thinking? Yeah. And he doesn't get to the 30, or there's a penalty, or both. And it ends up hurting the field position. So I think he was solid. I think he was good. But, he just didn't have that all-pro level play this year. And I just wish he exercised more consistent judgment on when to let the ball be downed and when to run it out.
The judgment thing is the big thing for me. And I agreed with you, Gil. I gave him a B because he did his job for the most part, but I just think of certain situations where don't return the ball, where the opening game of the year down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where the Packers were down by 5 against Philly late in the fourth quarter. And Keyshawn Nixon catches the ball in the end zone, and instead of taking a knee and getting the ball at the 30, he returns it, doesn't even get to the 30, and he wastes, 5-6 seconds?
Right.
That's a play and a half. That's 1 to 2 plays that you could have had if you didn't do that. And also, it would have saved you a lot of field position as well. That's 2-3 plays that you're talking about where the Packers possibly could have stolen a game on opening night.
And I get it. He in his own mind, he's like, hey, I got to make a play here. But
yeah,
you got to use your judgment. And again, it's the judgment that knocked him down to a B in my mind.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. I think the Packers are definitely going to be they're always looking for the best player available, but I think if they're going to be looking for a new returner, a receiver, a corner, or a DB, whatever it may be, who can return kicks, because Keyshawn Nixon even sounds like he just wants to be done with returning kicks, which I don't blame him, because he did have some good moments at corner this year, and he obviously wants a bigger contract down the road. Corners get paid a lot better than specialists, so that's just Keyshawn Nixon's prerogative. So be it. Jaden Reed, he was the primary punt returner for the Packers this year. 14 returns for 110 punt return yards. That was 33rd in the NFL. Also had 2 fumbles. That was tied for 4th most in the NFL. His longest return was only 16 yards on the punt return, even though as a rookie, his longest punt return was 35 yards. Kind of regressed in this area. Jaden Reed in general regressed this year, especially late in the season, which is troubling to see. Gil, what's your grade for Jaden Reed as a punt returner, though, this year?
I went with a C+. I don't think he did anything special. I don't think the fumbles were the big reason that sort of kept him in the C range for me. There was no dynamism there, and there were times when he was fielding the ball inside the 10 when I kind of questioned whether or not he should have time to just let the ball bounce and probably get into the end zone. So I think he was just there. I don't think he was spectacular. I don't think he was awful. I gave him a C+.
I gave him a C-. I was a little harder on him. Just because I think I expected so much from him, and he was just very disappointing. And you said where he was returned, he would have fair catches deep in their own territory. But then there are other times where he's not running up to go get a kick and the ball bounces 20 yards, 15, 20 yards, where that's college crap. You can't do that in the NFL.
No.
And that's something where clearly the Packers didn't feel like they had a better option at punt returner, because guess what? You allow that to happen in the NFL as a punt returner. Typically, you're hitting the bench and someone else is taking your spot at punt returner, because that's critical. It just special teams so much. It's doing your job, and it's also just bettering field position and taking advantage of field position. And too many times, Jaden Reed let opportunities go right by him.
And there were some other times where he called for a fair catch, and I'm like, you've got 10 yards in front of you.
Yeah.
Like, just even if you just run 5 steps forward, 3 steps forward, that's 2, 3, 5 yards more than you would have had if you just made the fair catch. So, look, it's easy for me to say there are not 250-pound guys running full speed at me while I'm trying to field a kick, but that's the job description. So, I just think, again, judgment, not always the best.
And I always thought, too, where I didn't feel like there was a sense of security back there with him either. Where
no, I agree.
Every time he was going back for a punt, I'm just like, I literally am just saying, catch it cleanly. Yeah. Take care of the ball, get to the sideline. And you never say that with the best returners in football. You never do. And it was a big issue this year. He dropped a lot of passes as a receiver, and he had a lot of fumble issues too. And it was kind of hit or miss. It was more of a miss this year at punt returner this season for Jaden Reed. And that was just always kind of troubling and frustrating. Now, 2 other guys who had a kick return each this year, Bo Melton and Corey Ballantyne, incomplete grades. Obviously, they each only had 1 kick return this year, so we're not going to grade those guys. Let's go to the punting unit, though. And we were talking about Daniel Whelan before, where he's really a bright spot when it comes to the punting game in Green Bay. He's honestly, I think, their most consistent punter since maybe Tim Mastay. Just a good player. You know what you're going to get. Kind of had some rough games to end the year. Didn't have his best. Wasn't playing his best football. The Packers in general weren't playing their best football at the end of the year. What's the grade that you give Daniel Whelan for 2024?
until maybe the last 4 or 5 games of the year, he was A minus territory. But because he had some of those games where he really struggled, I knocked it down to a B plus. I really like Daniel Whelan. He's very good as a holder. It is not easy to punt in Green Bay, especially late in the year. Mm-hmm. It's cold. It's windy. The ball is hard. It doesn't carry as far. You got guys kicking in California or Florida or in a dome that have a big advantage statistically over Daniel Whelan. But I like this guy. He does a good job. B plus would have been higher if he didn't tail off at the end of the season.
And you mentioned where guys who it's hard to kick outside in Green Bay in December and January. Corey Bajorquez was victim number 1 because of that, where the guy had a huge leg and had a really good start to his lone season in Green Bay, but then kind of tailed off at the end of the year because it got cold and his leg was not as strong as before. Daryl in the chat was just saying, Packer fans just need to relax, give the young players time to develop a few more years. He has very high confidence that they'll be better. Patience is golden sometimes, just takes time. I agree with you, Daryl, overall, and I agree with Gil's ranking or his grade of Daniel Whelan. I give him a B plus as well, where you look back at 2023, he averaged 46.2 yards per punt. He had 18 punts that landed inside the 20, only 5 touchbacks, and 22 forced fair catches, while this year averaged 46.1 yards per punt. A little, just right around the same average as a year ago. Had 22 punts pinned inside the 20. That was a little better than 2023, and only 5 touchbacks. 4-to-1 ratio, which is pretty solid. He also forced 17 fair catches and only 20 punt returns allowed this year. That was second best in the NFL. And what we were saying earlier, Gil, terrific holder in the kicking game.
Absolutely.
Terrific holder.
And that's an underrated thing, because if your holder is not good, the whole kicking game is off. And you need to have that consistency at holder, and Whelan gets that job done very well.
I like that. Hey, he's a young punter that they didn't draft, first of all, and a young guy that they found in the free agency pool. And he obviously outdueled Pat O'Donnell, a good veteran punter a couple summers ago. And now he's got a job probably locked up for a good amount of time. You just hope you can find this consistency at punter, and you don't have to worry about it for another 15, 20 years. That's the dream. I mean, that is the dream.
Yeah. I'll take 5 or 6 to start, but yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Mason Crosby was kicking for 16 years, but kickers are a little different. I get that.
Yeah.
And speaking of kicker, obviously the Packers kicking situation was a bit of a circus in the preseason, where you had Anders Carlson and Greg Joseph competing for the kicking job in 2024. Well, neither of them ended up kicking for Green Bay in 2024 officially. They signed Braden Narveson, who was an undrafted rookie free agent signing with the Tennessee Titans, didn't make it with the Titans out of camp. The Packers signed him. He only lasted 6 games with the Packers. He missed a kick, at least one field goal attempt in 4 of those games. Probably would have missed a field goal attempt at least in 5 of those games, but the miss against the Titans didn't count because it was a Titans penalty, and essentially the missed field goal was erased in that game. Was only 66.7% on the year on field goals, tied for 3rd worst in the NFL. Just a really, really disastrous start to his career. Braden Narveson, what was your grade for Braden Narveson for the short time he was a Green Bay Packer?
I had to go C-. I mean, he made all his extra points. He made all the short field goals, but from 30 yards and out, he was iffy. And you got to be good from 45 and in, really consistently in the NFL. It was unfortunate. I was rooting for the kid. He just didn't come through, and I hope he gets another opportunity and can make good, as long as it's not with another NFC North team. But, he just did not consistently get the job done.
And Narveson, ironically, even though he was cut by the Titans in training camp, at the end of training camp, he went back to Tennessee, had 1 field goal attempt for the Titans late this season. Titans have the number 1 pick for a reason this year. Just not a good team, but he missed his only field goal attempt in that game on the year. And just clearly a rookie kicker. This situation was not meant for Braden Narveson, because I feel like the Packers are a little better than your average NFL team right now, even though they did have a rough end to this 2024 season, but they have such a bright future ahead. And Braden Narveson just wasn't him kicking for the Green Bay Packers, it wasn't good timing for him. My grade, though, for Braden Arvison was a D. He just was not good. He was perfect on extra points in 6 games with the Packers, but again, just the field goal percentage. You couldn't rely on him. You could not count on him. And he didn't attempt a field goal longer than 45 yards in his time at Green Bay. Yeah, and it just he had 2 missed field goal attempts against the Minnesota Vikings in that Week 4 loss where they only lost by 2 points, and those field goal misses were huge momentum killers for the Green Bay Packers, where it was just a lot of issues, and he was kind of at the forefront of it early on for the Green Bay Packers. I don't mean to put it all on a kicker, but he struggled. He had one job, he couldn't do his job, and the Packers rightfully moved on.
They had to. He was costing them games, and you can't afford it. Look, if you want to be a contender, and the Packers viewed themselves as contenders this year, you need to be able to make those kicks on a consistent basis, and Arvison didn't.
And Arvison, obviously, he was released after the Packers' Week 6 win over the LA Rams, a game that, ironically, he didn't miss a kick in, and he actually had a big 45-yard field goal that he nailed in LA against the Rams right before halftime, a big field goal at the time in that game. But then they replaced him with a veteran kicker, Brandon McManus, who was released by Jacksonville last year and then released by the Washington Commanders after that, and ended up in Green Bay, and he was damn good, Gil. What's your grade for Brandon McManus in a part-time role essentially in Green Bay this year?
Well, 11 games plus the playoffs, so that's
full-time I'd say is a full season. So like he's technically part-time. If he's not full-time, he's part-time. But he'll be full-time probably moving forward.
Yeah, I hope so. I gave him an A-. The A- only because he missed that kick in the playoff game, and maybe we're not supposed to include that, but
yeah,
I
did with my ranking. Yeah,
it just left a little bad taste in my mouth, I guess. Thinking about that. So he was consistent. He rescued the kicking game, and I give him a lot of credit. But you got to be there in the clutch, and he was. Look, first 2 games after he signs with the Packers, walk-off game-winning field goals. So he was clutch, but just A- because of the playoff miss.
He should have had 3 game-winning field goals this year. The field goal kick against the Bears, that was ice in his veins on a cold day at Lambeau from 54 yards. That should have been another game-winning kick too. But with Brandon McManus, though, it's fine. I did include the postseason, the missed field goal from 38 yards. I did include that in my ranking. He had 1 missed field goal with the Packers during the regular season. It was in that monsoon at Lambeau Field where
the wind.
I've been very public, and the wind. I was at that game, and I was essentially my back was towards the wind and the rain when Brandon McManus, that 1 miss, he was kicking against the wind and the rain, and I was very public on here, and I was very, very outspoken how that was not Brandon McManus's fault. That was an elements miss because I had a perfect view right behind that field goal post. That ball was getting drilled, and then the wind and the rain just took it, and it didn't even get to the back of the end zone. It was just the weather was so wicked, and that wind was so wicked. The rain was terrible that day. So with that, I would have given him an A+, but I give him an A because of the playoff miss, and that's where he was perfect on extra points. He was so darn reliable, though. And this is what the Packers have been wanting to get since they let Mason Crosby walk. And Brian Gutekunst said after the season that he hopes to have Brandon McManus back in Green Bay for the long-term future, which is definitely the right move. And he proved that he could kick. He's a darn good kicker still, and he's perfect for Green Bay. He gets an A in my book.
Yeah, I mean, I had him at A until the playoff miss, so we're in the same ballpark. It's just a question of where we emphasize it.
Yeah, the playoff miss obviously was huge, but it's just that game was just a mess in general. I don't put that. There's a lot more blame to go around than Brandon McManus from that game, if you know what I mean. So
he is not at the top of the list as far as why they lost that game.
No. If anything, he's at the top of the list why the Packers were even in the playoffs this year. So
yep.
I'll give him that for sure. Gil, before we wrap up with some trivia, what articles you have coming up on Packers Post, She Said TV? Obviously, a little bit of a dull weekend ahead with the Pro Bowl games. Unless you love the Pro Bowl games, then hey, this is a great weekend for you. But we have a little break before Super Bowl 59 is coming up. What articles do you have coming up on Packers Post and She Said TV?
Well, for Packers Post, I'm going position group by position group and doing my end of season grades. I'm breaking down each player individually and then grading each position group as a whole. And for Cheesehead TV, it just talked a little bit about the need for Matt LaFleur and the rest of this coaching staff to cut down on those pesky penalties, the unforced errors.
A lot of self-scouting, a lot of self-evaluating, I hope, is going on this year. I will say with Matt LaFleur, the impression I get is that he's willing to shake stuff up and he's willing to adjust and adapt if need be. That's something where I loved Mike McCarthy as head coach. I think he's a great coach, but his inability to adapt was not a good thing. I think Matt LaFleur, that's a strength of his.
Yeah, it is, and let's hope that they can improve. Look, you got the youngest team in the league for the second year in a row, but you got to – look, every team commits penalties, but it's the type of penalty and the timing of the penalties needs to be cleaned up.
All right, Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Yeah, you told me this is hard, so let's go.
Yeah, I did. I did tell you before the episode that this is a tough one. I wouldn't get the answer to this one, and I'll give you some hints, too, if need be. But
all right.
As we mentioned earlier in this episode, the Packers, they have a new defensive line coach. They've hired previous Patriots defensive coordinator, 35-year-old DeMarcus Covington, as the new man in charge of the big boys of the defensive trenches. Now, before now, Covington was a coach of the New England Patriots organization from 2017 through 2024. Before that, Covington bounced around from college program to college program. He officially started his coaching career as a defensive graduate assistant at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, UAB for short, in 2012. A future Packer was actually on that roster at UAB in 2012 when Covington was on the coaching staff. Now, Gil, which former Packer played collegiately at UAB when new Packers D-line coach DeMarcus Covington was coaching at UAB in 2012? This player played on the offensive side of the ball, so he definitely was not coached by Covington specifically. He was a skill player on the offensive side of the football.
Okay, a skill player on the offensive side of the football.
I'm even going to tell you, it's a tight end. It's a tight end.
Okay. And I am going to guess that it is probably not a starting tight end.
He never started in Green Bay, no.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is a deep pull. I would not get this if I didn't know the answer. I'm telling you this. And anyone who's following with us on YouTube right now, feel free to chime in if you know the answer. Don't Google it. I know we all have smartphones and we all have quick access to answers. But if you know it somehow, put it in the comment section right now because you're a genius if you know this.
See, the tight ends that I could think of from around that time, none of them went to UAB. I mean, Richard Rodgers didn't go there. Andrew Quarles didn't go there. Justin Perillo didn't go there.
The guy who was buried on the depth chart, yes.
Yeah, obviously. I don't know.
And honestly, that is fair because I did not know this, and I was looking for it's hard to find good trivia questions this time of year, Gil. It truly is. The answer, though, is tight end Kennard Backman. And Backman played at UAB from 2011 through 2014. He caught 96 passes for 979 yards, scored 9 touchdowns in his 4-year collegiate career. The Packers drafted the 6'3", 258-pound Backman in the 6th round of the 2015 NFL Draft. He appeared in 7 games for the Packers as a rookie in 2015 before he was released after training camp in 2016. Backman would spend the next couple of years with the Patriots and Detroit Lions practice squads, but didn't play another official NFL snap until once his rookie year concluded. So yeah, honestly, this was an insane question. I know that, but hey, you learned something today, didn't you?
I did. And by the way, he didn't catch a pass.
No, he didn't catch one pass. He was primarily a special teams guy, which made it even harder. I mean, this is just, but now you know, if that ever comes up in a trivia night or a Packers trivia, Gil, we know now. So,
how many drinks into the trivia night is that? I mean,
yes. I'll just leave it at that. But hey, for those, for Endless Packers Talk and for people who tuned in on YouTube, Facebook to watch us live today, thank you so much. Click that bell on YouTube, turn the notifications on. We love to chat and discuss with people who are watching with us and live streaming with us throughout. And hey, we got a long time until the Packers kick off a new season. We'd love to chat with some people. We get a little lonely on these airwaves.
Yeah, and we'll be here every week with some great Packers content throughout the offseason.
Heck yeah.
We'll have the draft and the combine and free agency and everything in between. So mini camp, you name it, if it's happening to the Packers, we will end up discussing it. But that is going to do it for us today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at GoPackers, at Packers, or to ask us questions, or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And a big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. And thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.